My wife stood beside me at our son's graduation, clapping as his name was called. The cameras flashed, the crowd cheered, and for a moment, it looked like a perfect family portrait. But right there, in the middle of the ceremony, she leaned close enough for only me to hear and said she was moving in with her ex. She didn't whisper it with guilt or hesitation. She delivered it like a statement of fact, sharp and final. I didn't argue. I didn't turn to look at her. I raised my glass of cheap, sparkling wine from the reception table, took a slow sip, and kept my eyes on my son. The man he had become. The man I had raised. If she thought I was going to give her the satisfaction of a scene, she didn't know me at all. My name is Michael Turner. I'm 48 years old. For more than 2 decades, I built a life that I thought was unshakable. A career in logistics, steady and respected. A marriage that weathered storms, or so I believed. And a son, Aaron, who was now stepping across the stage into adulthood. That day should have been about him. Instead, it was the day my wife decided to bury our marriage in public. I didn't explode. I didn't plead. I didn't even glance at her as she smiled for photos, arm hooked with mine as if nothing had been said. But inside, a switch flipped. I went silent, not because I was weak, but because I understood that silence was stronger than any outburst. That night, while family gathered at the house to celebrate, she floated around the room with practiced charm, laughing, pouring drinks, pretending everything was normal. I stayed in the background, watching her with a calm that even surprised me. I knew what she was doing. She wanted control. She wanted me broken in front of others, begging her not to go. Instead, I let her have the stage. Let her play the part. When the last guests left and Aaron went upstairs, she finally looked at me as if expecting a fight. I gave her nothing. Just silence. No questions. No demands. That was the first moment she looked unsettled. She had prepared for rage, for bargaining, for tears. What she hadn't prepared for was stillness. I went to bed without another word, while she sat downstairs scrolling her phone, probably already messaging him. That night wasn't the end of the marriage. It was the start of something else. Something colder. A mission, the way I once approached military deployments years ago before civilian life dulled the edge. Observe. Plan. Execute. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I knew this wasn't about saving a marriage. This was about reclaiming myself, piece by piece, while letting her destroy herself with her own choices. 6 months later, she would beg to come back. But that night, at our son's graduation, she had no idea she'd just started a war she could never win. The morning after the graduation, the house felt different. Not quieter, just hollow. She moved through the kitchen like nothing had changed, brewing coffee, humming under her breath. She didn't mention what she had told me the day before. That was her style. Drop the grenade, then act like nothing happened. She wanted me to react, to detonate. I didn't. I took my mug, nodded once, and left for work. At the office, no one knew. My colleagues joked about weekend plans, shared photos of their kids, asked about Aaron's graduation. I kept my answers short. Outwardly, nothing in my life had changed. But inside, a steel calm had settled. I'd learned long ago that battles aren't won by noise. They're won by patience, by knowing when to move and when to stay still. That week, she packed small things when she thought I wasn't looking. A favorite sweater, a framed photo from her desk. She was staging her exit in increments, as if slipping out piece by piece would make her betrayal less obvious. I let her. Every item she carried out the door was a reminder that I wasn't losing her. I was being freed from her. At night, she stayed on her phone longer. I didn't ask who she was texting. I didn't ask when she planned to leave. I simply watched, silent, noting the patterns. Her restlessness grew as mine disappeared. She mistook my quiet for indifference. It wasn't indifference. It was calculation. Aaron noticed. One evening, he came downstairs and asked why Mom seemed distracted. I told him the truth without details. Sometimes people make choices that surprise you. He didn't press further, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He was 22, sharp enough to sense cracks, but old enough to decide where his loyalty lay. That gave me strength. By the second week, she announced over dinner that she'd be staying with a friend for a while. Her tone was rehearsed, her eyes watching for my reaction. I gave her none. I cut another bite of steak, chewed slowly, and said nothing. She shifted uncomfortably, expecting rage, maybe even begging. Instead, she got silence. That silence unnerved her more than any argument could. Because when a man refuses to fight for what you thought was your leverage, the power shifts. She was leaving with the belief she'd won, but she didn't realize she was already losing. When the door closed behind her that night, I poured myself a drink and sat at the table alone. The house was empty, but for the first time in years, I felt the kind of peace that comes before action. I wasn't abandoned. I was unchained. She thought she was moving on. What she didn't understand was that she was moving into her own downfall, and I was going to let her walk every step of it on her own. The clock had started, and 6 months later, when she came crawling back, it wouldn't be to the same man she left behind. The first week without her felt like someone had turned the volume down on my life. No constant notifications from her phone lighting up the room at night. No forced small talk over breakfast. Just silence. And silence has a way of sharpening a man's focus. I didn't chase her. I didn't ask where she was staying. I didn't even bother to check if she had really moved in with her ex, though I already knew. I had seen enough late-night messages, enough sudden absences to understand exactly where she had gone. What mattered wasn't where she went. What mattered was what I did next. I threw myself into routine. I woke early, worked out harder than I had in years, and showed up to work before anyone else. My colleagues thought I was just motivated. They didn't see the discipline forming behind my calm. I treated every day like a mission, one step toward a future where her betrayal no longer had power over me. At home, I started making small changes. The framed photos of us together came down, not in anger, but in precision, replaced with pictures of Aaron, of my parents, of moments that actually mattered. The house felt lighter with every trace of her gone. Aaron came by on weekends. He asked how I was holding up. I told him I was fine. He didn't fully believe me, but he also didn't press. He'd grown into his own man now, and I could see in his eyes the quiet judgment of someone who understood more than I wanted him to. He loved his mother, but he wasn't blind. He saw the choices she was making. He saw me not collapse, but grow stronger. That, I think, gave him his own sense of direction. Meanwhile, she reached out once in a while. A casual text asking if I had paid the electric bill. A message about some mail that came in her name. Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. Just logistical. I answered with the same energy. One-word replies. Direct, stripped of warmth. She must have felt the shift, because for years, she had been used to me smoothing things over, filling in silences, keeping the peace. Now I gave her nothing but stillness. By the end of the first month, I heard from mutual friends that she had been seen out with him, smiling, posting photos, playing the part of a woman who had upgraded. I didn't comment. I didn't retaliate. I simply noted it in my mind, another piece of the puzzle. Because the thing about men like her ex is they don't change. She had gone back to the same chaos she once ran from. It was only a matter of time before she learned that truth again. I wasn't waiting for her to fail. I wasn't hoping she'd come crawling back. I was building myself so that when the collapse came, as it inevitably would, I wouldn't just be standing. I'd be thriving. And that, more than anything, would be the response she never saw coming. By the second month, her absence no longer felt like a wound. It felt like clarity. I had more space, more time, and for the first time in years, no constant undercurrent of tension. I realized how long I had been living on edge, waiting for the next argument, the next cold silence, the next excuse about late nights. Now the silence was mine, and it was steady. I started to rebuild myself in small, deliberate steps. I changed my diet, cut out the takeout she used to insist on, and cooked for myself. Simple meals, but clean, controlled. I lost 10 pounds without trying, just from removing the chaos she carried with her. I invested more time into my work, and within weeks, my boss noticed. He asked if I wanted to take on a new project, something bigger. I accepted without hesitation. At night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon and thought about the years I had given to her. Not with bitterness, but with precision. A man can't rewrite the past, but he can learn from it. I learned that trust given too easily is a weapon turned against you. I learned that silence holds more weight than shouting ever could. And I learned that sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rising so far above the wreckage that the people who left you can't even reach the ground you stand on. Meanwhile, she was busy writing her own story. Friends mentioned she looked tired, thinner, older somehow. The glow of her new life wasn't shining the way she thought it would. She had posted photos at first, smiling with him, showing off dinners, vacations, the illusion of happiness. But then the post slowed, then stopped. The silence coming from her was different from mine. Mine was discipline. Hers was unraveling. Aaron noticed too. He came over one night and asked if I had heard from her. I said only that she was fine. He shrugged, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He loved her, but he was old enough now to see patterns, to understand what loyalty meant. And he saw me not crumbling, not lashing out, but standing taller than before. That left an impression no argument ever could. One evening, I found myself cleaning out the garage. Buried in a box was an old photo album, one she had insisted we keep. I flipped through the pages, memories layered with time. Weddings, birthdays, vacations. Smiles that, looking back, always seemed more staged than real. I closed the album and placed it back in the box. Not to forget, but to mark the line. That chapter was closed. She thought she had walked away from me to chase something better. What she didn't realize was that by walking away, she handed me the chance to become better without her. And as the weeks turned into months, the distance between us wasn't just physical. It was a canyon she had dug herself, and I had no intention of crossing it. The clock was still ticking, and when it struck 6 months, she would learn that the man she left wasn't the same man she thought she could return to. By the 3rd month, the silence had settled into routine. I no longer woke expecting her footsteps in the hallway or the sound of her phone buzzing late at night. The house was mine now, not just in name, but in spirit. Clean, orderly, steady. Every morning felt sharper, every evening calmer. At work, the project I had taken on grew faster than expected. Long hours didn't bother me. They anchored me. I was the first one in the office, the last one out. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon and told me he wanted me to lead the entire division. More responsibility, more pay, more respect. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded, accepted, and filed the promotion letter in a drawer. The world was starting to notice what I had always known, that my value never depended on her. Meanwhile, I kept hearing small things about her new life. Whispers from mutual acquaintances. She and her ex argued loudly in public. She had been seen leaving restaurants alone, shoulders tight, eyes down. The picture-perfect escape she imagined was already cracking. But I didn't smile at that news. I didn't feel vindicated. I simply noted it, like a soldier marking a shift in terrain. Aaron grew closer during this time. He called more often, stopped by after classes, asked if I wanted to grab dinner. He didn't talk about her much, and I didn't press. But every so often, I caught the way he looked at me, like he was measuring who I was now against who I had been. And he approved. That mattered more than anything. At night, I kept a notebook by my bed. Not a diary. A log. Small, sharp entries. Weight down another 5 pounds. Promotion letter signed. Garage cleared. Bank account balance higher than it had ever been. Each line a marker of progress. A reminder that discipline was stronger than despair. She texted occasionally, still keeping her tone casual. Once she asked if I had kept a box of her old clothes. Another time she wanted to know about a bill in her name. I responded with direct, simple answers. No warmth. No openings. Each short reply was a wall she couldn't climb. One evening, Aaron mentioned she had asked about me. Not directly, but in roundabout ways. How I was, what I was doing, whether I was seeing anyone. I shrugged it off. But inside, I knew what was happening. She had expected me to collapse. Instead, I was thriving. And that realization was already pulling at her. By the end of that 3rd month, I stood in front of the mirror one night, looking at a man I barely recognized. Stronger, clearer, focused. She had left believing she was moving into a better life. But the truth was simple. The better life had stayed here, in the house she abandoned, with the man she underestimated. And the longer she stayed gone, the clearer that truth would become. By the 4th month, I had reached a place I hadn't seen in years: control. Every corner of my life that once felt clouded by her presence was now sharp, defined. The house was in order. My finances stronger than ever. My body leaner, my mind clearer. I didn't just survive her absence. I thrived in it. She, on the other hand, was unraveling. I didn't need to stalk her or ask questions. News traveled on its own. Friends mentioned she looked stressed, worn down, older. The glow she had chased with her ex had burned out fast. The two of them argued constantly, sometimes loud enough for neighbors to hear. What she thought was freedom was turning into a cage. I never said a word. Not to her, not to anyone. My silence worked like gravity. pulling her back toward the life she thought she could throw away. And the more I refused to engage, the heavier that pull became. One evening, Aaron sat across from me at the kitchen table. He said his mother had called him in tears, though she didn't say why. He didn't ask me for answers. He just looked at me, searching for a reaction. I kept my face calm, my tone steady. I told him his mother would have to figure out her own choices. He nodded slowly, and I could see the pride in his eyes. Not pity, not worry, pride. He saw his father holding the line, unshaken. Meanwhile, at work, my new role expanded. I traveled more, met with clients, closed deals that pushed the company forward. The same discipline I had once wasted trying to fix a broken marriage was now fueling results everyone could see. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't the man in the background holding it all together. I was the man in front, commanding respect without asking for it. At night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, notebook open, and logged my progress. New numbers in the bank account. Another project completed. Another personal milestone. Each line was proof that I wasn't just moving on, I was building something stronger. Then, halfway through that month, she texted me late at night. "Can we talk?" Just 3 words. I didn't reply. The next day, another message. "I miss home." Still silence. A week later, a phone call I ignored. She was testing the waters, hoping I'd reach back, hoping the man she left was still waiting with open arms. But the man she left no longer existed. She had buried him at that graduation. The one standing in his place was colder, sharper, untouchable. The clock kept ticking toward 6 months. And I knew by then, she wouldn't just ask to come back. She would beg. And when she did, I would decide, on my terms, not hers. The 5th month began with silence on my end and desperation on hers. She had gone from short texts to long messages. Stories about how things weren't working out. Complaints about her ex, about how he hadn't changed, about how he was drinking too much, working too little, treating her like she was disposable. Each message read like a confession. She wanted sympathy. She wanted me to remind her she had a safe place to return to. I didn't respond. Not once. My silence was louder than any lecture I could have given. Every unanswered word forced her to sit with the truth that I wasn't her safety net anymore. At work, I closed another major deal. My team celebrated with me, but I kept the same calm expression I had at Aaron's graduation. Wins didn't need to be shouted. They only needed to be recorded. That night, I logged it in my notebook. New contract. Stronger than the last. Momentum building. Aaron noticed the changes in me more than anyone. One night, he told me he was proud of how I handled everything. He didn't say it casually. He said it like a man who had studied my silence and understood it. That meant more than any promotion or contract. I wasn't just rebuilding myself. I was setting an example for him, showing him that strength isn't in rage, but in control. Meanwhile, she spiraled further. Friends told me she had moved out of her ex's place temporarily, that she was bouncing between couches. The photos she once posted online were gone. Her presence shrank. She had gone from flaunting her new life to hiding its failure. Then came the email. Not a text, not a call. A full email, several paragraphs long. She admitted leaving was a mistake. She admitted her ex was the same man she had once run from. She admitted she thought I'd wait, that I'd still be there when it collapsed. She wrote that she wanted to come home. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. No reply. She had walked out in front of our son, made her choice with confidence, and believed I'd be waiting. What she didn't realize was that in the months since, I had built something stronger than what she left behind. I didn't need her anymore. By the end of that month, I could see the shape of the future without her. Clear, steady, sharp. She was already reaching back, her pride stripped away, her tone shifting from confident to pleading. And I knew the begging hadn't even started yet. The 6-month mark was approaching. And when it came, she'd discover the truth. I wasn't the man she left. I was the man she could never control again. The 6th month began with a knock at my door. Not a text, not a call. She showed up in person. When I opened it, she stood there with tired eyes, carrying the weight of her choices. Her smile was gone. Her confidence was gone. All that remained was a woman who had gambled everything and lost. She started talking fast, filling the silence with apologies, explanations, excuses. She said leaving was a mistake. She said her ex had promised her change, but turned out worse than before. She said she thought she deserved more, but what she had walked into was chaos. Her voice cracked as she finally admitted what I already knew. She wanted to come back. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just stood there, silent, watching her unravel. The longer I stayed quiet, the more desperate she became. Her words shifted from defensive to pleading. She asked if we could start fresh, if I could forgive her for one bad decision. She promised she had learned her lesson. When she finished, I nodded once and stepped aside, not to let her in, but to close the door gently between us. No anger, no shouting, just a quiet line she could no longer cross. That night, I wrote in my notebook, she begged. It wasn't a victory note. It was a confirmation. Everything I had disciplined myself to wait for had arrived exactly as I knew it would. In the days that followed, she didn't give up. She called. She texted. She even reached out through Aaron, trying to use him as a bridge. He told me about it, but he didn't pressure me. He had seen how I handled everything, and he respected the silence. His loyalty was no longer in question. Meanwhile, my own life continued to climb. Another promotion offer, a new client account, my health at its peak. Each move forward was another wall between us, another reminder that I didn't just survive her betrayal. I thrived because of it. One evening, she showed up again. This time she cried. She said she couldn't believe how easily I had let her go. She said she thought we had history, that we had built too much together for me to just stand there and stay silent. But history doesn't erase betrayal, and building something doesn't matter if one person decides to burn it down. She had burned it herself, and now she was asking me to hand her the ashes. I didn't. I kept my silence, and it broke her more than any words could have. By the end of the 6th month, she was the one living in pieces, and I was the one standing whole. The days after her second visit passed quietly, but the pressure around her kept building. She was unraveling faster now, stripped of the comfort she thought she would always have. The friends who had once cheered her new relationship were distant. The ex she chose over me had already started showing his true face again. Reckless, unstable, unreliable. And the life she thought was an upgrade had collapsed into something far less. I didn't interfere. I didn't reach out. I simply stayed steady. Each night, I wrote in my notebook, marking progress like a soldier tracking victories. Debt paid off. Second promotion finalized. Aaron thriving. My world kept moving forward, while hers circled the drain. Aaron came by one evening, looking conflicted. He said his mother had called him again, asking why I wouldn't speak to her. He told me she sounded desperate, like she didn't know where else to go. I listened, nodded, but didn't give him an answer. He studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, "I get it, Dad." He didn't need more. He saw what silence had built. Meanwhile, she tried everything. Apologies, promises, tears. Messages about how she had learned her lesson, how she wanted to rebuild what we had. She didn't understand that what we had wasn't just broken. It was gone. One Friday night, she left a letter at my door. Handwritten, pages long. I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer, untouched. Not because I wanted to save it, but because I wanted a reminder. A reminder that words mean nothing without action. And her actions had already spoken louder than any apology could. At work, I closed another deal. The kind that secured my division for years. My name was being mentioned in meetings I had never been invited to before. The same discipline that carried me through betrayal was now elevating me in every other area of life. It wasn't luck. It was control. And control had become my armor. That weekend, she tried once more. This time, she stood on my porch in the rain. She said she was lost, that she couldn't live like this anymore, that she wanted to come back. I opened the door, met her eyes, and stayed silent. My stillness broke her more than shouting ever could. When I closed the door again, I heard her sob on the other side. But I didn't open it. Because forgiveness isn't the same as weakness. And silence isn't emptiness. It's strength. By the end of the 9th month, she was the one begging, her world crumbling, her pride destroyed. And I was the one who had built a life stronger than before. The final chapter was waiting. And it wouldn't be written by her. It would be written by me. The 6-month mark arrived not with fireworks, but with silence. A silence I had built, sharpened, and carried like a weapon. My wife. No, the woman who used to be my wife was no longer the confident figure who had stood beside me at our son's graduation and announced her betrayal like a declaration of victory. She was broken, worn down, begging for a life she had burned with her own hands. She reached out again, this time with words so stripped of pride they almost didn't sound like hers. She said she was sorry. She said she was lost. She said she needed me. It wasn't love. It wasn't partnership. It was desperation. She had gambled on her ex, gambled on a fantasy of freedom, and she had lost everything. Now she wanted to crawl back into the life she thought would always be waiting. But the life she left behind no longer existed. I had rebuilt it without her. Stronger, sharper, cleaner. My work had flourished. My health had sharpened. My relationship with Erin was deeper than ever. My silence hadn't just been a wall. It had been a foundation. And on that foundation, I had built a new life. When she showed up one final time, standing on my porch with tears streaming down her face, she whispered the words she thought would move me. I want to come home. I looked at her and realized something powerful. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even tempted. I was free. I told her nothing. I didn't need to. My silence was the answer. I stepped back inside, closed the door, and let the quiet settle. She could cry, she could beg, she could regret, but none of it mattered anymore. She had made her choice in front of our son that day, and I had made mine in the months that followed. Later that night, I sat at my desk, notebook open to the final page. I wrote the last entry, mission complete, because that's what it had been. A mission of discipline, of patience, of silence. I hadn't needed to raise my voice. I hadn't needed to chase her. I had simply let her actions destroy her, while I built myself stronger in the ruins. Erin came by the next day. He didn't ask about her. He didn't need to. He looked at me, steady and proud, and I knew he had seen everything he needed to learn. His mother had taught him about betrayal. I had taught him about strength. 6 months earlier, she thought she was walking into a better life. 6 months later, she was begging to return to the one she had abandoned. But the truth was simple. The man she left didn't exist anymore. And the man I had become would never let her back in. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.